All right, what's up? Welcome in. Happy game day week for South Carolina fans everywhere. I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. We have survived the offseason. Dominion as the Gamecocks get ready to kick this thing off. And Chris, in a lot of ways, it does feel like this has been a long off season. In other ways, it feels like last year just ended. I don't know about you. We got to talk about this thing for a few more days, but I don't know about you, man. I'm ready for talking season to end and for us to have some games to talk about.
Yeah, we've talked long enough. We were sitting on the radio today, and I said something probably trying to be funny, and I just came to the realization of, man, we need some football. We need some actual games. We've talked for way long enough, but guess what? We're going to talk about it for a few more days. Every single little thing that we can. Earlier today, Wes, we were talking about how they're going to split snaps between the first team linebackers and the second and third, and what the rotation looks like at D tackle. We're in the minutia, right? We're about to get into as the team prepares to play Old Dominion. We're going to be gathering more information on Old Dominion, the matchups, getting real granular. But it's almost here, which is exciting. We had a little taste with week 0. Good game between FSU and Georgia Tech, by the way. Another good game in there. Another good game or two in there if you really were itching for some football like I was. But Gamecock football now around the corner. Certainly ready for it.
Yeah, and an interesting matchup, too. One that I want to actually dive into here shortly. We've talked so much about South Carolina. It is finally time to dive into this opponent. And we are hopeful that at some point we're going to have a depth chart today. I know that was the expectation. Unfortunately, so if you're watching us or listening to us live right now, no depth chart yet. We'll maybe preview that a little bit. If you are listening to this on the podcast platform later on, decent chance that the depth chart is already out. So, that's just the timing thing. Bear with us there. Probably could come out while we're actually here doing the show, which if it does, we'll give some live reactions on that. But first, Chris is talking about the minutia. I'll tell you who will just dive into all the minutia for you. Make sure you're covered. It's our buddy Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797. NMLS number 71597. Clint, an absolute veteran. Clint at the top of the depth chart. Clint, day one starter, 5-star. Throw all the cliches at Clint. He's the man. If you're looking to buy a home, hit up Clint today. Again, 803-422-6797. And while we're talking about good deals and good people to deal with, Chris, Gamecock Central has got a good deal going on right now as well.
Got an awesome deal, Wes. Let me see if I can pull up my handy dandy little graphic here. Kickoff sale, GamecockCentral.com. Wes, sources say this one's not going to be around for an incredibly long time. It is, after all, a kickoff sale, a preseason sale. If you're not a member of GamecockCentral.com, please come join us. Go to GamecockCentral.com. Super easy to sign up. Promo code is kickoff24. You do need to enter that promo code. Again, it's kickoff24. That gets you a full year. So it'll take you all the way through this season, the next transfer portal window, all that jazz. You can get through it. In-depth, complete insider coverage. I know we all like hanging out together here on the show. You can hang out with us all the time on the Insiders Forum. It's the place to be for Gamecock fans. And you get access to every single piece of content that we publish on Gamecock Central. You get it for the whole year at 50% off. Promo code is kickoff24. So if you're not already a member, hit that. Come join us. We'd appreciate it. We'd love to see you over there.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so let's dive into it, man. Again, because of the timing, I hesitate to preview the depth chart too much because by the time you hear this, the actual thing may be already out. But for those live with us, it's not out yet. So let's preview it a little bit. If it's already out later on, y'all just fast forward past this part a little bit. And Chris, I'm most intrigued, like you kind of teased, some of the minutia, some of the stuff that people maybe don't care about. I'm always intrigued by that stuff. I think your depth can sort of be, Beamer doesn't love depth charts and the idea of depth charts, but I think you can learn a lot about the depth of the team when combining it with the context of what we already know, what we've already gathered, all that information. And it does kind of provide a little official representation of where things are at. So for me, now, if there's a bunch of oars listed on the kind of the defensive line / edge group, that really doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot of anything to me at this point. Like we know a bunch of those defensive linemen are going to play. We know, Gilbert Edmond, Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart, a Brian Thomas Jr., a Dez Umeozulu, like those guys are going to play. How they're listed, I don't know if it's necessarily like I'll be curious to see, are there oars at that edge room? Like, do they list Kennard and Gilbert as the starters, or is it like, Gilbert or Dylan Stewart, something like that?
Yeah.
Noteworthy. We'll make note of it, but I don't think it necessarily means a ton. Curious to see, how they list the linebackers, etc. Does the backup group on the offensive line play out the way we think it will? I think a lot of these position battles we have been really tracking all offseason. For the most part, they kind of have settled to where I think we can say with a decent amount of certainty, I expect Josiah Thompson to be listed as a starting left tackle. It seems like Judge Collier is going to be listed as a starting corner opposite of O.D. Fortune. That would be my expectation, educated guess. I think it does get a little interesting at this position that we've talked about all offseason as well, wide receiver. Now, we know they're probably going to play 6, 7, 8 guys to start the year. I don't know that it matters necessarily. It's going to be more about who goes and performs.
Yep.
But it will be at least intriguing to see, do they list a first 3? Do they list oars at multiple spots? How do they choose to do it? I thought we had settled sort of on 3 or 4 guys, but then Chris, I read what you wrote in the Insider Report over the weekend. Maybe Nick Harbor, with his size and sort of ability to be a true X, maybe he slides into one of those starting roles, which is something I probably wouldn't have projected a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you've got kind of what's on the depth chart, and then you have what happens in reality and what plays out. I mean, South Carolina may come out game 1 and have 2 tight ends and 2 running backs and 1 receiver. Who knows, right? But for the purposes of the depth chart, I think you got to think about some things. Number one, Harbor, there's a couple guys with like size, like big time size on the roster, and it's Harbor and it's Delvon Campbell. They're more of those true like X receivers, right? Whereas the other guys are smaller receivers, guys that play that other receiver spot, guys that play in the slot. Mazio Bennett, Wes, is a guy that if you would have asked me last week, I'm like, yeah, he's probably going to be a starter, probably going to be listed on the depth chart. But I think the more you think through it, he's a guy that maybe, he's still going to play a lot, but maybe he doesn't start. I mean, it is game 1. He is a true freshman. He hasn't played. You've got a guy like, you got some other guys on this roster that have played, even if not at South Carolina. Guy like Vandrevius Jacobs, right? He's played some college football, not a lot. You got guys like Jared Brown, Gage Larvadan. They have played a good bit of football, yes, in another school, but they have some experience. I agree with you. It doesn't really matter who starts because I think they're going to get a look at several guys. Tyshawn Russell's another one, I think you throw in there. Luke Doty should be in there, et cetera, et cetera. They'll get a look at those guys. They'll watch in-game. They'll review the tape. The staff will go back and see, hey, who was most consistent? Who can we trust? Who blocked in the run game? Who ran good routes? Who caught the football? Who won 50-50 balls if there's any of those opportunities? And then you go through and look at that. Maybe the starters, maybe there's 1 difference, 2 difference, 3 differences, between game 1 and game 2. I think the margins between those guys in this competition has been pretty thin. But I think what South Carolina staff is looking for in that receiver room is just some guys they can rely on, playmakers. Who's going to go get it done under the lights? And until they do it, it is a question mark. I just tend to think game one starters, whatever's on the depth chart, whoever's out there game one. Maybe it stays the same the whole rest of the season, but whoever gets the first opportunity out there, they've got to go and make the most of it, because there's some guys that are, I think, right behind them based on, what we heard in preseason.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to frame up this season, we spend all offseason sort of gathering information about where things stand, and the coaching staff, they spend all offseason building a roster, trying to develop players, both on the field and with like strength and conditioning, sort of training type stuff. And their job is sort of, you go position by position, they're trying to maximize everything at each position. And so something I wrote about for today was sort of, what are our remaining questions for this team? And I didn't necessarily mean it like, I think you put, what was it, 82 questions about the upcoming season, Chris? Like, you had a bunch of them.
It's 30. It's 32. You're off by 50, okay. But yeah,
that was a lot though. But yours, some of it was philosophical, some of it was, this guy's effect on the. I looked at this more like position grouping.
Yeah.
What are the spots we're still kind of like we're not sure yet? And so, for example, sometimes when this happens and you get to the sort of start of the year, sometimes your concerns aren't really validated. You're like, oh, that. Remember the tackle battle, just going to way too deep into the off season. And, to me, there were some real signs, hey, this could be an issue. And so to me, the questions at this point are like, all right, what are the areas of this team that we're going that could be a concern? And to me, receiver, until you feel good about three guys, like when Dow Loggins says, hey, three guys have not, I'll make sure I say this exactly how it was presented. No one has separated themselves from the pack. When Dow Loggins says it like that at least makes my antenna go up a little bit. Like, hey, this room is going to need to perform a little bit more consistently than what they've done in practice so far. For me, defensively, I think they feel really good about this defensive line. I think they feel really good about these linebackers. I think you feel pretty good about the starters in the secondary. I think that's an area where you're like, man, we've got some depth in terms of rotating, maybe giving a Nicky a breather, giving DQ, giving Kilgore a breather. But it's not really a position where you can afford to stack some injuries and feel good about that spot. So does the depth in the secondary hold up? There's going to have to be some luck there, in my opinion. That's kind of how I look at the defensive side. And then back to the offense, we know this offensive line is going to be improved. We're pretty sure on that, pretty positive on that.
Yeah.
I think the question is just how much. Like, is that a small improvement? Is that a big improvement? Is that a massive improvement? There's levels to everything. We talk about that all the time. There's levels to everything in football. So those are like, when I'm looking at this team from a position standpoint, those are still the three spots where my antenna is sort of paying close attention to what's going on there.
So secondary in terms of backups, right?
Yeah, it's more like, will the depth in the secondary hold up? Like, I think they're fine. I look at depth two different ways. In some ways, it's like, all right, can that guy go play 10, 15 snaps to give my starter, a breath?
Yeah,
I think they're good there. Now, if you told me this guy rolled an ankle, that guy rolled, like if the injury started hitting the secondary, because it doesn't seem like there's always one position group that it just gets hit more than others.
Yeah.
You've got to hope that secondary is not that. It's not that you want any spot, but to me, you got to hope that's not the spot. So to me, receiver in general, can you be more consistent as a group? Can three people emerge? Secondary, I think you're fine with the starters, but can the backups either continue to progress or can you just be kind of lucky in terms of no injuries?
Yep.
And then O-line, to what level of improvement have we seen? And nobody wants the convo yet, but Chris, they're chipping away just a little bit already at that depth that we've talked about all offseason. Like let's acknowledge that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I was going there next, actually, and I actually want to definitively add one more position to that list and ask you about another one. Kind of what do we think about it? So, and let me briefly go over all those. DB, agree, feel pretty good about the starters. You feel like you got to see the performance, but you feel like nickel's on more solid ground this year. You now have 3 guys that played it last year. One of the problem was you had like 4 guys who played nickel. 3 of them are back this year. Keenan Nelson Jr. was the starter last year. So now you've got all 3 of those guys back, and it seems like you've got, okay, Jalen Kilgore's playing nickel. It seems a little bit more situated. But you do have to stay healthy. You remember, what was the game was 2 years ago, Georgia, at home. You're already playing Georgia, and you get banged up. I mean, you're banged up in the secondary big time in that game, and it really hurts you. And in that season, it wasn't for a long stretch, but even, I mean, Wes, against this schedule, you don't want to go into a game and say, hey, guys, Ole Miss is coming to Williams-Brice. Our starting safety and a starting corner are out. You don't want to hear that. And most teams are in that position. But I think for South Carolina, there's a little bit more, your antenna's up a little bit more just because you've got some younger guys or some unproven guys in some of those spots. Offensive line, I wrote about that. After Beamer announced, hey, A.J. Parks, he won't play in game 1. He's doubtful. Might be mid-season. Ja'Kai Moore, we'll see. Well, one of the things about this offensive line was you were going in saying, all right, you feel a little bit better. Casey Henry's healthy right now. He's healthy at right tackle. You've got Josiah Thompson at left tackle. You've got Tree, who could play left tackle, could slide over to right. And you got A.J. Parks and Ja'Kai Moore. A.J. Parks hasn't played a ton of college football, but he's been in college for a while. He's got some experience. He's seen high-level football. And by all accounts, from some of the things that Beamer said publicly, he had been playing pretty well. Well, he rolls an ankle in the scrimmage. He's out. Ja'Kai Moore, been a starter for South Carolina. He's played a lot of football games. Now that's your top 2 reserves. So now you're looking at it going, it's certainly 2 of your top 3 reserves at tackle. So you've really dipped into that already. We've said this at multiple spots. You like to build depth so you can keep depth, so you can play those guys so that you have them healthy if they're needed. You've already dipped into that before game 1. You're really going to be, honestly, kind of holding your breath throughout game 1 in the early part of the season that you can stay healthy until you can get some of these other guys back. I think we hit on receiver plenty earlier, Wes. Kicker I add in there, right? I mean, we've said it so many times. Carolina fans have been spoiled by how many just great kickers have rolled through here, not just the past few years. I mean, the past 10, 15 years. I mean, it's been remarkably consistent over multiple staffs, multiple coaches, many years. I think Alex Herrera is the favorite, but until you see it in a game in a big situation, I think that's one you've got to consider. It's been really kind to South Carolina over the last several years, many years. Will it remain the case? I don't think that's a foregone conclusion. Now, here's the one I want to ask you about. Normally, when you're breaking in a first-year starter at quarterback, that's a position where you worry about it. Even a big-time guy like Lenore Sellers was out of high school, we've certainly heard enough to where you feel pretty comfortable, I think. You recognize there's going to be freshman mistakes. You recognize the brutality of this schedule. But where are we on that concern level / maybe not concern level, question mark level going into game 1? You see what I'm getting at? Like, how do we classify how we feel about the quarterback position?
Yeah, and I mean, again, it goes back to levels. Like I almost included that in my three kind of questions or final nagging questions there. Decided not to. For one, just from a content perspective, I felt like we had talked about and written about quarterback and what are fair expectations and all that so much. I didn't rehash it on there, but I tend to think the better you can answer all those other questions,
Yeah.
the less of a factor that question is. And maybe that's weird to say about the quarterback position. I think, and I also, Chris, was trying to base it on like what we were hearing as well. Like what's the thought in the building?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, man, but I just haven't had anybody be like, we're not sure if Lenore's can get the job done.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And it's kind
To
of
a
strange.
surprising level.
It's surprising because I mean we've seen. I think we were talking about this the other week. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks who were very highly recruited or ended up being great, ended up being like Heisman Trophy guys who either didn't start immediately, redshirted, weren't immediately a superstar. And so I think you can recognize that, like, even for those guys, there can be concerns. And it does seem like people inside that building are very comfortable with Lenora Sellers. And look, I get it. I think you do have to. It's different than if we were sitting here and Lenoris had started for 2 seasons and had lived up to a lot of the potential that we believe he has, that I very much think he has. It'd be a much different conversation, right? Right now, it's more about this guy we think is going to be really good, but he hasn't been really good yet in those scenarios. So again, we're not going to be able to take away everything from game one, but after a few games, Wes, I think we'll have a better sense. And I think he'll probably get better and better as the year goes on. And it is his first year against a very difficult schedule. One more point, real quick. Just on your overarching theme of how there's levels to everything, I think that's the question. Like when we talk about the defense and when we talk about how, what types of improvements can USC make in the run game on offense and just generally on offense, a point worth considering, this could be a much better actual football team. But you look at who they play, right? Like a lot of the teams that they play are already really good to elite, or they're better than they were last year. Like Kentucky, are they going to be better than they were last year? I mean, decent chance of that. Missouri was an 11-2 team last year. A lot of people think they're going to be better than last year. Ole Miss, they might be better than last year. Oklahoma might be better than last year. So a lot of these other teams are sitting around in their college campus like bubbles as well, sitting here going, well, yeah, we did this last year, but this part of the team will be better. This part of the team will be better. So it just all goes back to, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind South Carolina's improved as an overall football team. Some things are better than last season. Some things are more questionable than last season. If you add it all in, I think they're a better team. What does that mean in terms of wins and losses because of this schedule? I think that's a question that we, have to consider.
Well, and Chris, a lot of these teams, and the beauty of ball is that, hey, there's going to be a team on that group you just said, and they're going to be maybe way better than people think they're going to be, and there's going to be a team in that group that just sort of hit some adversity. They have injuries at the wrong spots, and then their season just kind of goes off the rails. So I think that's the fun thing about it. We already have seen in week 0, which I've said many times, I'm not a week 0 fan, but that was fun on Saturday. We've already seen a team that was, in a lot of ways, because of what they did last year and what they brought into the portal, was kind of being crowned by not just their local guys, like by the national guys. And Florida State already got humbled a little bit by Georgia Tech. So will the overall, I would say, parity in college football, like I feel like in the NIL world, you have some teams taking full advantage. Like, I mean, Ohio State, one of the bluest of blue bloods, they've used NIL to build an incredible roster up there. But, does it kind of even the playing field once you get above that sort of, or below that just completely elite part of college ball, does that lead to more upsets and kind of that good but kind of middle ground where you're talking about teams in your top, I would say outside of top 15, but top 15 to 30 type teams, I think. So I think my guess, my belief is that South Carolina is going to be in a lot of close football games this year, and whether or not they are able to sort of execute in those games, as always, will determine the winners there. You got me on there, Chris? Are you good?
We're back. We're good to go. I lost you for about 30 seconds. I don't know what happened there. There's a conspiracy. They're trying to not let us talk about the Gamecock football season, whoever they is.
They don't want us to talk about the depth chart. That's what it is.
They're trying their best. They really are.
Mine was messing up earlier. I don't know. Hopefully we're good. By the way, before we have any more depth chart talk, let me tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. If you want to see this thing in person on Saturday and you don't have your tickets yet, go ahead, download the Game Time app, do what we do, and there's the app right there. You can see it if you hit gametime.co on your browser or go to any of the app stores, whether that's Apple or Android. You can download the Game Time app. And, man, this thing is loaded. I've told y'all several times before when me and some friends and the wife went to the World Series, we used the Game Time app. But it doesn't have to be the World Series. It could be South Carolina versus ODU this weekend. Some great things about this app. It's going to tell you which deals are the best deals on there right now. It's going to compare the value for that deal to other deals for that same game and stadium. One of my favorite things, Chris, the all-in pricing. I can't stand when you see a ticket, you're going to a concert or event, and it's like, oh, that's not a bad price, and then you click it, and all the fees and everything gets added in there. All-in pricing is going to let you know exactly how much a ticket costs up front, no surprise fees, which for me is a huge thing. Also, if you're not familiar with the stadium, maybe you're going to the Oklahoma game for the first time this year, and you have no idea what the stadium is set up like. They have seat views right there in the app. They have a lowest price guarantee where Game Time will give you 110% of the difference if you find a seat in the same area for a cheaper price. And perhaps most importantly, they have the Game Time ticket coverage, which means your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, use the code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code ON3 for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. In 5 days, it truly will be game time. Actually, Chris, what will everybody be doing? It is 2:31 on Monday afternoon. 5 days from right now. Y'all might be having a little, adult beverage or two. You'll be sitting there. You'll be doing this. The person who likes to leave the tailgate early, it's gonna be going, all right, guys, let's start pack this thing up soon. The person who likes to run into the game at the last second, it's gonna be, all right, hold on, just a couple more drinks, and one of your buddies is gonna be convinced that South Carolina is gonna be the surprise team in the entire conference, and one of your buddies is gonna be convinced that the Gamecocks might win 2 games this year and that there's no point in even going in the stadium. But you're going to be happy. You're going to be tailgating, and everybody's going to be having a good time.
Well, you're going to be, really the biggest thing, Wes, is going to be, hold on, let's finish watching as much of the Georgia Clemson game as we can, right? I mean, that's a nooner. People are going to want to finish that game off as much as possible. Get over to Gamecock Walk. I was trying to pull up the schedule, Wes. Am I crazy, or didn't they release like the game day schedule?
Well, yeah, if you were looking at the Gamecock Central Twitter.
There you go. That's exactly where I saw it. And I was looking in the wrong place once again. So, yeah, let's pull that up here real quick. Yeah, so Gamecock Walk, you mentioned 2:31. People are going to be hanging out at Gamecock Walk probably, if that's your thing. Stadium gates open at 2:45. So if you're an early stadium arriver, go check out Gamecock Walk. You're getting the stadium. Welcome in the ODU faithful. Get ready to go.
Yeah, so Chris, there will be another opponent in the stadium on Saturday.
Okay.
I feel like we have not talked about Old Dominion itself at all. We're efforting a guest, hopefully, to tell us a little bit more about ODU. But the thing that has caught my attention so far, I want to dive into them a little bit. Other than having a linebacker who makes like 20 tackles a game, they want to run this Tennessee style offense, like the Josh Heupel style offense, which means they're going to spread you from coast to coast, like as far as their receivers can possibly go. And then if they make first downs, they want to run tempo. They want to run power run game inside with quick throws to the outside and really get you off base. I thought it was fascinating. You look at their coaches and their coaching tree. I was expecting, this guy was with Heupel, this guy coached under Heupel. Fascinating thing is they had basically like a volunteer assistant a couple of years ago that had been with Heupel at UCF. And so their current OC was like, dude, y'all are putting up crazy numbers. What were y'all doing down there? And so this volunteer assistant, he just starts drawing up stuff on the board. Like, well, here's our concepts. Here's what we base out of, blah, 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 blah. And their OC was like, all right, cool. That's what we're going to do. So it basically was literally like you or I on the internet, like, dang, that offense knows what they're doing. Let's copy it. And so that's what they've done. They've really struggled the last couple of years to really some of the same issues Carolina has had. Run the football, protect the passer. They got, I would say, a good bit better in running the football last year compared to 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was just awful. They've gotten better. They bring back some of their offensive linemen. They're replacing some others. They bring back their quarterback, bring back some guys on defense. But to me, one of those early questions will be, all right, is this a game where Carolina, like the best way to defeat a team that wants to go hurry up, like defeat that whole concept, is 3 and out. Like that can't even become a factor if you're getting them in early 3rd and longs. Does this become one of those games, though? It's not the triple option, but it could be like, this scheme can give you fits if you let them kind of chunk away 6 yards here, 6 yards here, 6 yards here. Then they're running to the line of scrimmage. Then you try to sort of contract your defense a little bit. So then they throw the quick screen to the outside to get you running sideline to sideline. I've always said Tennessee and that approach is a momentum-based offense. And you really just have to keep them from grabbing any of that momentum and being able to wear you down offensively.
And I think you fight that if you're South Carolina. Of course, you're going to want to play well on defense. And like you said, Wes, get off the field. When those types of offenses are kind of getting the shorter, you're able to run the ball, number one, because that's what we forget. Like in that Tennessee offense, people are like, oh, they throw it all over the place. That's the fun part, unless you're playing against them. They run the ball extremely well in that offense, right? I mean, that's what Tennessee has done with Heupel. That's what you've got to avoid. But if you're South Carolina, you want to walk away from this game going, South Carolina really controlled that game, and it started out with what they were doing, South Carolina on offense. So as that message just said, run the ball. That's what the Gamecocks got to do. And when you look at the past, few years, when you look at the Beamer era, when South Carolina has struggled to run the football, they've struggled overall. And so that's what you want to see in this game. I keep talking about 2022 Georgia State because even though South Carolina won, that's the feel that you want to avoid. You don't want to go out of this game saying, they were clunky, they rushed for 79 yards, and they gave up 200 rushing yards, because that's what happened against Georgia State. Still won by 3 touchdowns. Gamecock fans want we rushed for 200 yards and we limited them to 79 rushing yards, right? And I think that's the way that you can really, really control a team like Old Dominion wants to run on their offense.
Yeah, no doubt. Shout out to Mr. Oscar Attaway Jr. I know you're excited to be out there and watch Oscar run on Saturday. Hey man, let us know if you're in town. Come by the tailgate. Come say what's up. We'd love to have you by. But Chris, I think you look at the line on this game, just under 21 points. South Carolina's favored by last check. I think it's 20 and a half, which I think it's probably about right. Do you ever really know early on in the season? Could Old Dominion be a surprise team in their conference? Of course, we don't know that yet. They're projected. I saw Phil still had them, I think, like sixth in their division. So at least on paper, this is not a team that necessarily has the high expectations you might expect, even for a team that, beat Virginia Tech a couple of years ago and has been sort of willing to face off and give trouble to some bigger schools. So I think, we talk about this offensive line. We certainly did earlier. We certainly have all offseason. How much better would South Carolina fans feel if they're going into the fourth quarter and they're just like, man, this offensive line has controlled the line of scrimmage. The running backs, Rocket's gotten his, Oscar's gotten some run, Juwan Howell's gotten some run. Like if fans are sitting there like Carolina's rotated these backs in, they've had some chunk plays, but for the most part, they've just run the football at will. I feel like now would that tell us anything about them facing off with Alabama later? Of course not. But doesn't that just beat the heck out of the alternative? Like if fans are sitting there going, well, they had some explosive runs, but they had a bunch of zeros as well, like 0-yard gains.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't tell you everything, but that would not be a good early sign.
Yeah, it would not. I mean, if week one game, not, game one, whatever week it is, I guess it is week one technically. It's week one. It's not going to tell you everything. So no matter what happens, there's always room for things to get better or worse. I think the word regress is overused, Wes, but you can regress in some areas, even from game one, week 2, week 1, week 6, you can improve in some areas. I think we see that a lot. We've seen that in the past few years for South Carolina with SEC opponents. One week, they'll look like they can't do anything. The next week, look like they can do everything. So the key is just going to be more consistency and trying to lean towards the area of being able to do a lot more, right? Particularly when you think about the offensive side of the ball. But it will be a concern. If you walk away from this game and you say, gosh, they averaged 2.5 yards a carry, couldn't get anything going. Maybe they had 1 or 2 big runs. That really is tough when you start thinking about just the next week. You got to go to Lexington and play Deion Walker in that Kentucky front. That if you can't run the ball against Old Dominion, no disrespect to them, you're not going to feel quite as good about going into the teeth of this SEC schedule and doing it. On the flip side, if you do see a run game where you can control everything and you look crisp on offense, doesn't mean you'll go do it against Kentucky by any means, but certainly people will feel more confident about being able to do so.
Yeah, Happy says it says nothing against Old Dominion. Against Kentucky or LSU, it's a different story. I don't know if I would say it says nothing, Happy. I think it says something if you run the football, like if you just control the line of scrimmage and kind of run the football at will. That doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it against those other opponents, but it beats the alternative. Like we have seen South Carolina at times struggle to do that against some lesser, quote unquote, lesser opponents. So I think that would just mean, hey, there has been progress here, and don't really, in my opinion, underestimate the value of some confidence too. Like I think when you go out there and control the line of scrimmage, it would give those guys confidence that everything they've been doing all offseason is paying off. And it just takes all that pressure off of your offensive line off your quarterback, your passing game, all those things, because I've said this a million times. There is nothing better for an offensive coordinator than knowing they have a 5 or 6 yard run in their back pocket, because that's when you can throw the football on first down. You can get Sellers throws against good looks when teams are having to take away the run from you. And then even if you miss, even if you have an errant throw, even if something's off, you can deal with 2nd and 10 if you know you can get into 3rd and 5 or 4 with some type of run on 2nd down. How many times, Chris, our colleague over at 107.5, he's talked about it, Tyler Head, Carolina was in 3rd and 8 on average last year? That is no way to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't do that.
Like that's even, Carolina struggled running the ball and in pass protection last year. Even if you struggle in pass pro, but maybe you're a good rushing team, you can do some things to negate that by keeping yourself out of 3rd and long. But when you're struggling with both of them, so it's, all right, run the ball on first down. Oh, we're in 2nd and 9. Run the ball again. We're in 3rd and 8. Oh, now they're pinning their ears back. So let's say you're a running team. You can run the ball very well, but you struggle in pass pro. You can get yourself into 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. That way, that's a down. You can run. You can throw. You can go RPO. You can do all types of different things. You can say, hey, we're going to throw the ball on first down when they're expecting us to run, and we're going to run the ball when we're expecting us to throw. So I think I don't know. Like I feel like we've talked it to death, but I'm really looking forward to just sitting in Williams-Brice and having all this new data coming in, all these new things that we can then talk about against an opponent that I think is solid and an opponent that will test you, but you should beat. You really should be able to control this game. And I think the beauty of that, man, is if you can get control of this game early, that is going to allow you to get some more, like to keep that sort of healthy rotation going. Go ahead and break the seal for some of these young guys, rotate all those wide receivers in, and, let's go see who can consistently make some plays and start to solidify the rotation for some of these uncertain spots moving forward.
Yeah, I think people just want to see I don't want to say no, a limit to penalties, procedural things offensively. I think I'm fascinated by what the offense looks like, Wes, just in terms of what do they come out in? What does the personnel packages look like? What does the offense look like with a Sellers in the backfield? Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway, this running back room that's deeper to where you feel like you should be able to run the ball more effectively. That's number one, right? No matter what they're running, you want to see running game success. But once you get that, what does it look like? Like, how is the running game being administered from a call standpoint? What receivers can get open, right? And then defensively, can South Carolina clamp down on an offense that, this isn't the biggest challenge, not even close, that South Carolina will face defensively. But I do think it's an interesting challenge, Wes, because of the style of offense that they'll be playing. Ole Miss, Missouri, a lot of these other teams, they're going to present much more of an actual challenge. But this is a pretty good week 1 test for the defense, even given that, because it's a team, like you said, you should beat, but you also have an opportunity to answer some questions that we all have going in.
Yeah, and dude, you want to get deep into the minutia on that? We've talked all offseason about how South Carolina wanted to get faster and more athletic at linebacker and how they use the portal to do that. I mean, this is a team, if they have their way, they're going to, force your linebackers to run sideline to sideline. So that's something I'd be watching. I'll be curious to see, does it feel like South Carolina's backers are getting out there to the perimeter, getting to the football quicker than they did last year? And then obviously this whole scheme is designed to sort of put you in a one-on-one situation. So there will be a lot of times, more than likely, where that running back may be in a one-on-one situation with either a linebacker or a safety who is filling an alley, and if your guy wins the battle, then it's no harm. If your guy loses that battle, then guess what? There may be an explosive run. So I think there are going to be some intriguing things that, like if you were like, hey, they hold Old Dominion to 14 points on Saturday. I don't know if that, like, again, kind of like we were talking about with the rushing attack. It doesn't tell us everything, but there would be something, especially depending on how it plays out, like how it actually happens. There may be some little things to glean from exactly what it looks like. I think we also will learn, do we see more 3-3-5? Do we see more 4-2-5? What's the split there? And, a point Travis was making earlier when we were talking about the scheme, do we see more of one or the other just because of the scheme they're facing? And it's not necessarily a view into the future. Like it very easily could be, they like the 4-2-5 more, but they like the 3-3-5 more this week just because it gets an extra athlete on the field. So I think you can't ever put everything into one game. You can just glean little tidbits here and there.
Yeah, overarching point. I mean, I think we would learn more if the team struggled in different facets, right? And that can be offense, defense. It can be some like subcategory in there. They passed the ball very well, but didn't run it very well, right? I mean, the kicker got 3 field goal opportunities and made 1. Then you kind of mark that down and go, ooh, on the other side, they call Alex Herrera out and, hey, Alex, here's a 45-yard field goal, and he nails it, and then goes hits another one later in the game. You go, okay, maybe that gives you some confidence if you're Shane Beamer that, okay, maybe this is a little bit better than we thought, or maybe certain areas are a little worse than you thought. You kind of have to contextualize them. That's tough to do nowadays in college football, but contextualize things, consider the opponent, consider the situation, consider the scheme. But I do think we will take away some things from this game that will help us going into week 2. And then in week 2, we'll have a little bit more data to take into week 3, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm very curious. You talked about will there be any procedural issues and people not wanting to see those things on offense. So as I've been hitting refresh for honestly hours waiting for this depth chart, the old depth chart has kept popping up. And dude, it struck me. Like, we knew this, but so let's assume, because this is kind of what we expect, that Tree and Tro are not starting, right? If you look through this depth chart, depending on if Nick Harbor is a starter or not, because Nick was a starter the final sort of, I don't know, third half of last year. Depending on if Nick Harbor is a starter or not, the depth chart for the Clemson game, the Gamecocks would have 3 guys that were starting that game that will start the game on Saturday.
On offense.
Whew.
And I think when you look at that, Wes, there might be some of those positions where you go, well, they can get a little better there. Some where it's a question mark, and some where you go, ooh, like it would be really nice if Xavier Luedecke was on the depth chart, or Spencer Rattler even, right? I mean, you feel pretty good because if you have to lose a Spencer Rattler, it's nice to have a Lenora Sellers, but you got more, you're adding experience on the offensive line, right? You've got the guy who started your season as your right tackle in Casey Henry. He obviously didn't play against Clemson. You now have him. So I think even within that, it's a great point. Lots of changes, lots of potential changes there. Some good, some we don't know yet, right? Within that context.
Do you know the three off the top of your head?
So 3 that started against Clemson that could start game 1.
Yeah, well, three that were listed as starters
Yeah.
on the depth chart. It may have been a little different in the game itself.
And that's if Nick starts against ODU.
Yeah, so Nick is one of them.
Nick is one of them. Well, the other ones would be Vershawn Lee would be one. Terminex
Head's favorite player.
player, Terminex player of the offseason, which is kind of nice. The other one was Josh Simon a starter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, starter in the 2 tight end set.
In 2 tight end set. Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
That is kind of crazy.
Now you have some of those guys back, and then, like you said, you're getting other guys into the mix, like a Cason Henry, who, could have played, would have played a lot last year if he was healthy. Tree and Tro are available this year, just maybe aren't necessarily projected to start. But you go down the list, man. Running back, obviously completely different. Quarterback, different. Wide receiver, different. Rashawn Lee, the only one on the offensive line that was listed as a starter going into that week. So kind of fascinating stuff when you kind of frame it up that way. All right, y'all. Hey, we thought we'd have a depth chart by the time we were on here talking. We do not. So it is what it is. We are still waiting. When we get it, we will post it on GamecockCentral.com, and we will then talk about it on GamecockCentral.com with some reactions. If you're not on GamecockCentral.com, again, like Chris told you earlier, Kickoff 24 gets you 50% off. And I believe this is still valid as well. If you prefer to go monthly, use code SCAR1, get 2 months for $1 on Gamecock Central. So a couple of good deals for you there. But, man, we're pumped. We're excited. Thank you, as always, to everybody who hopped on. We're going to be on a little more consistent schedule coming up throughout the college football season. And so tomorrow, Chris and I will be back on 2 o'clock. Wednesday, our colleague Jack Veltri will be on probably around 2 o'clock. That will be after the coordinators speak. And then on Thursday, we're doing a special live show from BP Skinner Clothiers in the Vista. So if you're in Columbia, if you're near downtown, if you're near the Vista, come on out. That will be an extended show. It will be kind of our final preview for the season. That will be our final preview for the ODU game. And we're going to have several former South Carolina football players join us, both some of them mobile, like they can't be in town, but they're going to join us on the show. Others will be there live at BP Skinner, where we're going to have some giveaways. I believe we're going to have some refreshments. And again, some former players that will be dropping by as well. We'll give you more details on exactly who those guys are. We have a pretty good idea who's coming. I don't want to promise it yet. I know schedules can be fluid, but going to be really fun. So, again, that's Thursday from BP Skinner Clothiers. You can get more information on them at bpskinnerclothiers.com as well. All right, y'all. For Chris, I'm Wes. Appreciate it as always. We'll be back later on. Again, Tuesday show, 2 o'clock. We'll see.